You don't evict your own mother from her house, unless you're counting on her dying soon. I wish I could say I misheard it. That the words had been twisted in my tired brain, or that my son, my only child, had been joking, talking about someone else, something else.
But no.
That was exactly what Jacob said. And he said it with the calm, flat tone of someone talking logistics, not lives. My name is Margaret Green. I'm 67 years old. I was a school librarian for 38 years. A widow for 30. And last week, I found out that the son I raised with bedtime stories and casserole leftovers was plotting to sell my home out from under me, before I even knew it was no longer legally mine. Let me take you back to that moment. It was a Thursday evening. I had just returned from volunteering at the public library, cataloging some donated books and helping a little girl find her first chapter novel. The kind of evening that usually fills me with quiet pride. I let myself in through the side door like I always do, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake Lily, my 18-month-old granddaughter. She's the only reason I let Jacob and Lauren move back in. They said it would be temporary. That was 6 months ago. Now the house is louder, messier, and somehow lonelier. As I passed the dining room, I heard Jacob's voice.
Low. Clipped.
Serious. He was pacing near the window, phone pressed to his ear, laptop open on the table. I slowed, curious. And then I heard it. She doesn't need all that space, he said. Once the sale goes through, we'll move her into something smaller. Maybe a retirement condo or even assisted living. Honestly, we're doing her a favor. There was a pause. Then, in that same chilling tone, no, she won't make a fuss. She signed the deed over last year when we told her it was estate planning. She has no clue. She still thinks it's hers. The room spun. I had to grab the wall. I had signed it. He brought documents over last year. Lauren was there, too, holding Lily on her hip and smiling too widely. It's just to avoid probate, they said. It's standard these days.
And I
trusted him. My son. My flesh and blood. He had tricked me. I took a step back from the hallway, retreating like a burglar caught mid-theft. My tote bag, filled with donated books, and my thermos suddenly felt too heavy to carry. My legs carried me to my bedroom like they didn't belong to me. They were selling my house. My house. This was the home Charles and I bought in 1984, the year after Jacob was born. A 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and the creaky floorboard in the hallway that I never had the heart to fix. Charles died in that bedroom across the hall, his hand in mine. I raised Jacob here. Took his first day of school photos by the oak tree out front. Sewed his Halloween costumes in that living room. And now he was plotting to lock me out of it. The betrayal didn't hit like thunder. It fell like snow, quiet, cold, and suffocating. That night, I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the wallpaper Charles insisted on hanging himself. Pale yellow with faded vines. I used to hate it. Now I was afraid it was the last thing I'd ever fall asleep looking at. I watched the shadows crawl across the walls and thought, he expects me to go quietly. To thank him, even. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Because if he thought I was going to crumble, cry, and beg for scraps like some washed-up woman with nowhere to go, he was going to learn the hard way who raised him. At breakfast, I played along. Made pancakes. Set the table like nothing had happened. Lauren strolled in wearing silk pajamas and started scrolling through her phone. Jacob came down late, kissed Lily's head, muttered something about heading out for a meeting. A meeting. Probably with a realtor. Or a lawyer. Or whoever was about to slap a sold sign on my lawn. I watched them talk over me like I wasn't there. My blood boiled, but my face smiled. Because while they were planning my erasure, I was planning something else entirely. They'd taken the house. Now I'd take everything they thought they owned, including the future they thought they'd secured. They forgot one thing. I may not have the deed, but I have the receipts, the signed checks, the renovations I paid for. The full paper trail. And the one thing they really should have feared. I have nothing left to lose. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't burn all at once. It smolders. It eats at you in the quiet spaces, when you're folding their laundry, wiping down the kitchen counters, or rewatching home movies they don't even remember being in. That next week, I didn't lash out. I didn't scream or demand answers. Instead, I watched. I listened. And for the first time in my life, I kept my mouth shut when I wanted to cry. Jacob and Lauren assumed my silence meant ignorance, that their plan was sailing along smoothly. But it wasn't silence.
It was strategy.
Because now that I knew the deed had been transferred out of my name, I had only one real weapon left: documentation. And I had decades of it. On Saturday morning, while they were out house hunting, code for viewing listings they planned to buy with the proceeds of selling my house, I pulled down the 3 dusty file boxes from the closet in the upstairs study. Charles used to call them the fortress. Neatly labeled folders for every expense, repair, and update we had made since moving into the house in 1984. Every contractor's receipt, every property tax bill, every notarized check. It was all there. I sifted through them with shaking hands, part anger, part adrenaline. Plumbing repairs from '89. New roof install in 2004. Charles's will. My solo refinancing agreement from 2011, which helped pay Jacob's college tuition. He didn't just grow up in this house. He grew up on it. And now he was preparing to sell it like it was just another square of real estate on a spreadsheet. Another stepping stone toward his next luxury condo and Lauren's dream of a kitchen island big enough to host brunch for influencers she barely knew. By Sunday afternoon, I had gathered a thick binder of evidence, proof of ownership, contribution, and historic investment. I made copies.
2 sets.
One I hid in the trunk of my car beneath the emergency blanket. The other went to Maria, my old friend who still worked at the law office downtown. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Maria asked when I handed her the envelope. "No," I said. "But I'm done letting them make decisions while I sit in the background like some expired warranty." She didn't ask more questions. Just nodded, pressed the envelope to her chest, and promised it would be secure. Back at the house, Jacob was in the backyard, pacing on the phone again. He had developed a habit of stepping outside when he didn't want me to hear things. Ironic, considering what I had heard. I leaned by the window, heart in my throat. "Yeah, we're going to list it next Friday," he said. "No." She still has no clue. It's kind of genius, really. She's been so checked out lately, she didn't even ask about the paper she signed. A pause. "No, we're not giving her a cut. She lives there. That was her payment." That last part hit me like a slap. That was her payment. I gave him my entire life. Gave him a roof. Gave him a college degree. Gave him space to move in when their overpriced rental fell through and they just needed a place to stay for a few months. Gave him time with Lily, warm meals, a clean house, and he thought I was paid in occupancy? I didn't cry. I set the kettle on the stove. Because I had just made a new decision. I wasn't just going to stop the sale. I was going to take the entire house back and teach them what it really means to own something. That night at dinner, Lauren mentioned casually, "We might need you to head out to the cabin next weekend. The real estate agent is stopping by to take photos, and they need everything staged right. No clutter, no elderly touches. You know?" She sipped her sparkling water like she hadn't just called my presence clutter. "The cabin?" I asked, feigning confusion. "The one in Seaview," she said, blinking. "You haven't used it in years. You can go relax there for a few days. It'll be good for you." Relax? At the rusted family fishing shack they never showed interest in until now. "Oh, that actually sounds lovely," I replied, smiling. "A few days by myself. No noise." Jacob didn't even look up from his phone.
Perfect.
They thought I was folding. They didn't know I was filing. That week, I contacted Attorney Shaw, the man who helped Charles and me put together the original will back when we were still thinking about second children and summer schools. He remembered me instantly. I told him what was happening, what I'd overheard, what Jacob had done. "You're not the first person to walk through this door with a story like that," he said quietly. "But you might be the first who came prepared." We drafted the beginning of a motion. Quietly. No dramatic confrontations. just legal threads, being pulled one at a time. By the time Friday arrived, the day they planned to list the house, I had filed a preliminary injunction. It wouldn't stop the sale completely, but it would pause it, long enough to cause panic, long enough for me to step out of the shadows. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine with herbal tea and homemade cornbread, while a legal bombshell ticked quietly beneath the surface of our kitchen table. The listing was supposed to go live at 10 a.m. sharp. By 10:03, the real estate agent was on the phone with Jacob in a state of confusion. By 10:12, I heard Lauren shriek from upstairs like someone had just told her Chanel was going out of business. What do you mean the title is under injunction? That doesn't even make sense. I sat at the kitchen table, calmly slicing strawberries into a ceramic bowl. The sun filtered through the lace curtains just right. Peaceful. Domestic. Like any other morning. Except today, the wolves were circling their own fire, and I had quietly taken the matches away. Jacob came downstairs in a fury, phone glued to his ear, pacing like a man whose sandcastle was finally seeing the tide roll in. What do you mean it's frozen? No, I didn't authorize anything. Who the hell is Margaret Green? I smiled into my bowl of fruit. That would be me, sweetheart. The injunction was temporary, of course. Just a legal pause, filed quietly by Attorney Shaw and backed by the binder of records I had dropped off days earlier. It was elegant in its simplicity. A request for formal review of the property's ownership transfer based on evidence of deception, undue influence, and abuse of trust. Nothing dramatic. Nothing public. Just enough to freeze the sale. Enough to make the walls start to close in on Jacob and Lauren before they even realized I was the one turning the key. I don't know what she's trying to do. I heard Lauren snap through the baby monitor later that afternoon. She was fine with all of this. She signed it. Jacob mumbled something I couldn't hear, but Lauren's response was sharp. No, I don't care if she's your mother. She's a liability now. A liability. That's what I'd become in my own home. Funny how quickly mom becomes problem the second they can't control you. Later that evening, Lauren emerged from their room, phone in hand, makeup perfectly applied despite the storm she was clearly brewing behind her glossy lips. We need to talk, she said, her tone sweet and sharp all at once. Oh, I answered mildly, wiping Lily's high chair with a damp cloth. About what? The house, she said, smiling too brightly. There's been a misunderstanding. Something came up on the title search. Is that so? I said, not breaking eye contact. Yes, she continued. A legal thing. Apparently some form wasn't filed correctly when you signed the deed over. Nothing serious. Just a hiccup. A hiccup, I echoed. Jacob appeared behind her, tense, jaw clenched. I'm going to need you to sign something tomorrow, he said. Just to clear it up. I let the silence hang between us. Watched them squirm. Of course, I said finally. Lauren exhaled, relieved. I'll need to read it carefully, I added, standing up. Maybe have someone look over it. You know how my eyes are these days. The smile drained from her face like tea through a cracked cup. Of course, she said tightly. Just don't take too long. We're on a schedule. Oh, honey.
I am the schedule now.
That night, I sat in my room with a warm blanket around my shoulders and a cold fire raging in my chest. I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one Charles and I bought on our anniversary trip to Vermont, and pulled out the manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside, our wedding license, Charles's will, letters he wrote me before he died. One in particular was addressed to Margaret, if things ever get ugly. I had never opened it.
Until now.
It was short, just 4 lines, written in a steady, blocky script. If they ever try to take what you built, fight. Not with fists but with fire. You've always had the match. Use it. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. The next morning, I visited Attorney Shaw's office again. We discussed the next step, filing a formal claim of fraudulent transfer and requesting a full title review hearing in county court. If the judge agreed, even partially, it could not only void the original deed transfer, but opened the door to a complete reversal of ownership. The trick wasn't just proving that I had been deceived. It was proving that Jacob knew he was deceiving me. And that's where the voice memo came in. Because I hadn't just overheard Jacob on the phone that night. I had recorded it. Accidentally. At first, I'd hit the voice memo app in my pocket when I reached for my keys. But once I heard what he was saying, I kept the phone in my coat, silent, capturing every word. When I played it for Shaw, his eyebrows rose slowly. "This," he said, pausing the playback, "changes everything." Back at home, Lauren was in full meltdown mode. She had rearranged the living room furniture twice in one afternoon and snapped at Lily for touching a candle on the coffee table. Jacob, meanwhile, had turned oddly quiet. He knew, or at least he suspected. He'd seen the glint in my eye now when I answered his carefully worded questions. He'd noticed the phone calls I made on the back porch. He'd started asking, "What are you up to?" with a nervous half-laugh that didn't reach his eyes. I just smiled. Let them wonder. Let them sweat. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something they hadn't counted on. Power. And I was just getting started. There's a certain look people get when they realize they've underestimated you. It's not fear, at least not at first. It's confusion. The twitch behind the eyes. The frozen smile. The scramble to recalculate. Jacob gave me that look at exactly 3:17 p.m. on Thursday, just after I slid the folder across the dining room table. He hadn't even opened it yet. But he knew. "I thought you said you didn't want to be involved," he said, voice tight. "I said I trusted you." I replied calmly, not that I was checking out. Lauren sat to his left, arms crossed over her fable and oak blazer, the one she wore when she wanted to look like the reasonable one in the room. She hadn't said much since they asked me to sign the new corrective deed, the one I agreed to review. "I never said I would sign it." "Mom," Jacob began, trying to summon his old warmth. "This isn't personal. It's just logistics. You're still living here. None of that changes." "Not yet," I said. Lauren's head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer her. I watched Jacob. He opened the folder. Inside, a printed transcript of the recorded call. A list of notarized home expenses I had paid over 40 years. The affidavit I filed. And sitting right on top, a letter from Attorney Shaw on official letterhead. Notice of pending title dispute and formal hearing request. He skimmed it. Then again. Slower this time. His fingers curled at the edges. "You filed a claim," he muttered. "Yes." "This is insane," Lauren said, standing up. "You're going to drag your own family through court? For what? A house you don't even need. You mean the house I raised you in? The house you tried to sell behind my back?" Jacob's face turned a shade paler. "I signed that deed under the assumption it was for estate planning," I continued. "Not so you could turn around and list the property without my consent. That's called fraudulent transfer, Jacob. There are laws." "You're seriously weaponizing the courts over this?" "This," I said, rising from my chair. "This is my entire life. This house is all I have left of your father, of my independence, of the 20,000 nights I stayed up when you were sick or studying or just needed someone to remind you that you mattered. You want to evict me from my own history and call it logistics." Lauren laughed bitterly. "No judge is going to undo a signed deed because you got your feelings hurt." I turned to her, eyes sharp. "I have a recording of your husband admitting I had no idea what I was signing. That you both planned to keep me in the dark until after the sale. That's not hurt feelings, dear. That's premeditation." Her mouth snapped shut. I pushed the chair back in and walked to the kitchen. "Now," I said, "you both have until Monday to decide how you'd like to handle this. You can fight me in court, or you can come to the table in good faith, admit what you did, and we talk like adults. Either way, I'm not leaving." I poured myself a cup of tea and left them in stunned silence. The following day, things in the house shifted. Slightly, but noticeably. Lauren no longer floated through the halls with her usual superiority. Instead, she clutched her phone like a lifeline, whispering into it for hours. Probably her father, the real estate lawyer. the one she name-dropped like a weapon. Jacob avoided me altogether. But what really struck me was the way they treated Lily. They were quieter, more careful, like the walls were thinner. Like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to realize that things could fall apart. And then came the envelope. Slipped under my door that night. No conversation. No confrontation. Just cream-colored cardstock with a neat label. Mutual settlement proposal. I opened it slowly. Inside, a 2-page document offering me a graceful transition plan. They wanted me to vacate the home within 30 days in exchange for a $50,000 payout and 6 months of rent in a retirement-focused condominium community of their choosing. It didn't say the word eviction. But that's exactly what it was. $50,000. For 40 years. For my memories. For my identity. I folded the papers back up and burned them in the fireplace. The next morning, I went to the courthouse. Filed the formal paperwork for a full title fraud review. It wasn't just about blocking the sale anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine. Attorney Shaw said it best as we walked out of the building into the wind. You're not fighting over walls and floorboards, Margaret. You're fighting for the right to be seen. And that's something courts do understand. That night, I sat with Lily on the porch swing. The stars were bright. The air smelled like dry leaves and distant rain. She pressed her tiny hand into mine and looked up. Gamma stay here? I smiled. Yes, baby. Gamma's not going anywhere. Because now, finally, Gamma was fighting back. And the game had just begun. They thought I wouldn't go through with it. That I'd back down the second lawyers got involved. That once the big names were dropped, Thomas Harrington, senior partner, real estate litigation expert, I'd slink back to my knitting and afternoon crossword puzzles and let them take the house in peace. But they underestimated the one thing that makes women my age truly dangerous. We've already survived the worst. Husbands buried. Bank accounts drained. Children raised on hope and duct tape. So no, I didn't flinch when Lauren's father finally entered the game. I welcomed it. It started with a voicemail. Crisp. Condescending. Mrs. Green, this is Thomas Harrington. I've been made aware of your recent legal entanglement with Jacob and Lauren. I'd like to propose a more constructive approach. Call me back by end of day. Constructive. That's the word people like him use when they want you to sit down, shut up, and be grateful for crumbs.
I didn't call back.
So he showed up. In a slate gray Mercedes that cost more than the entire edition I put on the back of the house in '97. He stepped out wearing an overcoat, checked his watch like he was late for something more important, and rang the bell 3 times. Short, sharp, impatient. I opened the door slowly. Mrs. Green, he said, his tone clipped. May I come in? No, I said. But you're welcome to speak. He blinked, surprised. Then he smiled, thin and performative. I believe this situation has gotten out of hand. Oh, I agree. I understand you're upset. Change is difficult at your age. Mr. Harrington, I cut in. Are you here to mediate or to belittle? He raised his eyebrows. I'm here to prevent this from becoming embarrassing. For everyone. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorway. You mean embarrassing for you? Because if this goes to court, the transcript of that phone call your son-in-law made, the one where he admitted they deceived me, becomes part of public record. That wiped the smirk off his face. You don't want this fight, he said, dropping the pretense. You have no legal standing. You signed the deed. It's over. Then why are you on my porch? He said nothing. I smiled sweetly. Tell Lauren I said hello. Then I closed the door and locked it. Later that evening, Jacob tried the guilt angle. He brought me a cup of tea, Earl Grey, the way I used to make it for him when he stayed up late studying. He sat across from me in the den, hands folded like a child about to confess. Mom, he said, this is getting ugly. It got ugly the moment you lied to me. I didn't lie, he said carefully. I just didn't explain everything. That's not a defense, Jacob. That's a confession with extra syllables. He exhaled through his nose. I didn't want you to worry. I thought if I told you we were selling, you'd panic. You're not young anymore. And you're not 15. But I still treated you like a grown man. He flinched, then softer. We needed the money. There it is. I was laid off 6 months ago, he admitted. I didn't tell you because I thought I'd figured out. Lauren's marketing work dried up. We're behind on everything. I leaned back. So that was it. They weren't upgrading their lives. They were drowning. And they thought my house would be the lifeboat. And instead of asking for help, I said, "You decided to quietly evict your mother." I didn't see another option. There's always another option. You just didn't like the one that involved humility. He stared at the floor. I felt the anger soften, just slightly. Not because I forgave him, but because, for the first time, I saw him not as the calculating betrayer, but as the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms. Still, fear doesn't excuse destruction. You want this house? I said. You want it so badly, you were willing to steal it? He looked up. I'm not giving it to you. Then what do you want? I want you to learn what it feels like to earn something again. The next morning, Lauren had packed 2 suitcases. I'm going to stay with my parents for a while, she said. Until this gets resolved. Lily clung to her leg, confused, tugging at her scarf. Lauren peeled her off with robotic hands and gave her a kiss that didn't land. Then she was gone. Jacob stood by the window for a long time. Silent. Still. He didn't follow her. Didn't try to explain. Didn't even close the blinds. When he finally turned around, he looked older.
Smaller.
Mom, he said. Yes. I want to fix this. That night, I sat at the kitchen table alone. Same table where I used to help Jacob with homework. Same table where Charles told me he had cancer. Same table where I signed the deed without reading it. But tonight it felt like a battlefield I had finally won a round on. One step, one page, one boundary at a time. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we go to court. Let's see how Mr. Harrington does when the judge doesn't care about his car, his suit, or his name. Let's see how they all do. When a mother fights like she's got nothing left to lose. Because I don't. Except this house. And I'm not giving it up. Not now. Not ever. Courtrooms don't look like they do on television. There are no thunderous gasps. No perfectly timed objections. Just dry air, scuffed floors, and the faint squeak of legal shoes across linoleum. But that morning, sitting across from my son in Somerset County Family Courthouse, the silence was louder than any gavel strike. Jacob wouldn't look at me. Lauren wasn't there. She had stayed in Manhattan with her parents. But her absence weighed heavier than her presence ever had.
It was just Jacob now.
And me. And the truth, ready to be spoken out loud, in front of strangers, for the very first time. Judge Kavanaugh, a stern but perceptive woman in her late 50s, adjusted her glasses and addressed the courtroom with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this kind of family wreckage far too many times. Case number 22-419. Margaret Green versus Jacob Green. Petition to review transfer of residential property title on grounds of alleged coercion and misrepresentation. Parties present. Let's begin. Jacob's lawyer, a stiff man in a gray pinstripe suit, launched into his argument with theatrical concern. Your Honor, this case is an unfortunate misunderstanding. My client, Mr. Green, initiated the title transfer as part of a forward-thinking estate plan. His mother, Ms. Green, signed willingly, with full awareness. There is no malice here, no manipulation. Simply a family navigating aging and asset management in a modern economy. I almost laughed. Navigating aging? As if I had wandered off into paperwork and signed my rights away because I couldn't tell the difference between a will and a wine list. My lawyer, Attorney Shaw, waited calmly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't roll his eyes. He just let the other side build their narrative because he knew what was coming next. Judge Kavanaugh turned to us. Ms. Green, do you dispute that you signed the transfer deed? I do not, I said clearly. But I signed it under false pretenses. And you have evidence of that? Yes, Your Honor, Shaw replied. We'd like to submit a voice recording entered as Exhibit A. Jacob's eyes darted toward me. And for the first time that morning, he looked scared. The judge pressed play. The recording filled the room. Jacob's voice, calm and confident. She doesn't even know she signed it over. Told her it was for estate planning. She bought it. No questions. Like always. And then, clear as crystal. We'll sell it next week. Move her into something smaller. Honestly, we're doing her a favor. The room fell silent. Jacob's lawyer stammered, objected to context. The judge waved him off. She doesn't even know, Judge Kavanaugh read aloud from the transcript. Told her it was for estate planning. She looked up. Mr. Green, did you not represent the deed transfer to your mother as part of a non-final, preparatory arrangement? Jacob shifted in his seat.
I didn't mean it that way.
Please answer the question. He swallowed hard.
Yes.
I said that, but it wasn't meant to deceive. I didn't think she'd care. Didn't think I'd care. Like this house was a trinket. Like my life, my memories, were some dusty box in an attic. Judge Kavanaugh leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. I'll review this more thoroughly before issuing a ruling. But on preliminary assessment, this constitutes strong grounds for a full title reversal pending investigation. My breath caught. Not victory, not yet. But a foothold. Jacob slumped forward. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear. But the damage was done. Truth had been spoken. And truth, once heard, doesn't shrink back into silence. Outside the courthouse, Jacob caught up with me. He looked like a boy again. Not the man in the expensive jacket, not the real estate schemer, not the orchestrator of my erasure. Just a boy. Mom, he said quietly, I messed up. I didn't reply. You don't understand. I was drowning. We both were. Lauren kept saying this house was the answer. That you'd be better off in assisted living. That it would all be simpler. Simpler for whom? He flinched. We weren't thinking straight, he continued. She was pressuring me. And I thought if we just got through it, it would make sense later. I didn't think you'd fight back. That part stung. You didn't think I'd fight, I repeated. He nodded. No, I said. You didn't think I could fight. We stood there in silence for a long time, the wind tugging at our coats. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know, I said. But that doesn't change what you tried to do. He looked down. What happens now? I looked past him at the courthouse steps, the gray sky, the future we had yet to navigate. That depends on whether you keep pretending this was a misunderstanding or finally admit what it really was. That night, I returned home to an empty house. Lily was with Lauren in the city. Jacob didn't come back. And for the first time in months, the walls didn't feel like they were closing in. They felt like mine. I sat by the fire, holding a framed photo of Charles and me on the porch the day we moved in. The house was newer then. So were we. But the smile on his face, full of hope, full of fight, that hadn't aged a day. I brought the fight, I whispered. Just like you told me to.
And now?
Now I'd wait for the ruling. Because whatever happened next, I'd already won something bigger than the house. I'd won back my voice. And I wasn't done using it yet. Some women announced their presence with a whisper. Lauren preferred stilettos on hardwood.
Click, click, click.
I heard her the moment she crossed the threshold, uninvited, unwelcome, unaware the walls had already begun closing in around her. She walked into my living room like it was a showroom, purse swinging off her wrist like it cost more than my first car. I assumed Jacob told you I'd be stopping by, she said, peeling off her sunglasses and placing them on the mantel like she'd been away on holiday, not hiding behind lawyers and lies. No, I replied without looking up from the folder I was reviewing at the kitchen table. But nothing surprises me anymore. She stood there a moment, clearly waiting for an invitation to sit. It never came. Look, she said with a sigh, this whole legal charade, it's gotten out of hand. For everyone. I glanced at her. Her lipstick was perfect. Her tone was diplomatic. But the tight grip on her phone betrayed the panic she was trying so hard to hide. Jacob told me you're refusing the settlement, she continued. Which is fine. We can go higher. It was never about the money. She blinked. It's always about the money. I closed the folder and stood slowly.
No, Lauren.
It's about respect. Something this house was built on. Something you and your husband have been hemorrhaging for months. She walked to the table and placed both palms on its edge. Listen to me carefully. You are a 70-year-old woman with no job, no pension beyond your modest teaching retirement, and no title on this house. If this goes to court, the only person who's going to lose is you. I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned and opened a second folder on the counter. Inside was the certified copy of the voice recording transcript, my notarized affidavit, and my ace in the hole, a newly surfaced email. From Lauren. Subject line. Just sign it. She won't know the difference. I slid it across the table without a word. She read it, and her jaw locked so tight I could hear her molars grind. This isn't admissible. It doesn't need to be admissible, I replied. It just needs to exist. And be real. And be seen by the right people. Like, say, Judge Kavanaugh's clerk. Or the local news. You wouldn't dare. I already did. Her breath caught. I leaned in. You didn't just underestimate me.
You forgot me.
You forgot that I spent 38 years cataloging and cross-referencing every detail of every story ever printed in this town's library. I may have gray in my hair, Lauren, but I know where every skeleton hides and how to dig without leaving a trace. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out, because she realized something dangerous. I wasn't bluffing. I was prepared. Later that night, Jacob came home. He looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 days.
His voice was quieter now, slower.
Like he was trying to walk through the mess without triggering another explosion. I heard Lauren came by, he said. She did. She wants to settle. So I heard. He sat down across from me, finally meeting my eyes. I don't think I do. I raised an eyebrow. I think we need to fix this, he continued. Not sweep it under a rug or bury it in lawyer talk. Actually fix it. It was the first honest thing he'd said in weeks. What changed? I asked. He hesitated. Lily. She's asking about you every day, he said. She thinks you're at the library or gardening. She keeps asking why her gamma doesn't tuck her in anymore. I felt my throat tighten, but I said nothing. She loves this house, he added. It's all she's ever known. Just like me. Then why did you try to take it? He looked down. I was scared, he admitted. I thought it was the only way to keep us afloat. And I got so used to the idea of owning it that I forgot what it meant to belong to it. I studied him. His hair was uncombed. His shirt slightly wrinkled. But his voice? It didn't shake. What do you want, Jacob? I asked, folding my arms. He exhaled. I want to make it right. But not just for court. For you. For me. For Lily. I nodded. There's a hearing scheduled next week, I reminded him. You can still fight it. Or you can come with me. And tell the truth. He looked at me, eyes glassy. I'll come with you. That weekend, I went to the shed. Not the main one, but the little garden shack Charles had built behind the rose bushes. Inside was a rusted lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Inside that, the original blueprint of the house. It had Charles's handwriting all over it. Notes like, add window here for sunset view. Margaret's reading nook must be perfect. I traced the edges with my fingers and felt the weight of everything we had poured into these walls. Not just wood and insulation, but intention.
Care. Love.
This house wasn't just where we lived.
It was where we became.
I wasn't going to lose it.
And now?
Neither was Lily. The next morning, I called Attorney Shaw. Draw up a new trust, I told him. One that protects the house until Lily turns 25. Even if we win the case? He asked. Especially then, I said. This isn't about punishment anymore. It's about legacy. And boundaries.
He paused.
Smart move. I smiled.
No, Shaw.
It's not just smart. It's justice. The courtroom was colder the second time. Maybe it was the weather, gray clouds pressing against the windows. Maybe it was the weight of everything about to be decided. But I knew the chill wasn't outside. It was in me, settled somewhere deep between my ribs, like a reminder that I had been here before, underestimated, ignored, dismissed, and this time, I wasn't leaving quietly. Jacob sat beside his attorney. I sat with mine. Lauren was nowhere to be seen. And honestly, that felt right. She'd started this in the shadows. It made sense she'd slink away before the lights turned on. Judge Kavanaugh entered the room with that same calm, clipped efficiency. But this time, when she looked at me, there was something else in her expression. Something that resembled respect. We're here today to deliver the court's ruling on the matter of Green versus Green regarding the disputed title transfer of 37 Ashgrove Lane, she began. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at the documents before her. After reviewing all submitted evidence, including the audio recording, supporting financial documentation, and the plaintiff's sworn affidavit, I find that the title transfer was conducted under misleading pretenses. While the deed was signed voluntarily, it was not done so with full understanding of its implications. Jacob stiffened in his seat. The court rules in favor of Ms. Margaret Green, Judge Kavanaugh continued. The ownership of the property is hereby returned to her sole name, effective immediately. A hush fell across the room. No applause. No gasps. Just Jacob, sitting perfectly still, his knuckles white against the arms of his chair. And me breathing. Not relief. Not triumph. Just clarity. It was done. The house was mine again. But that wasn't the end. Not for me. Not for him. Outside the courthouse, Jacob stood beside me in the parking lot, shoulders hunched beneath his suit jacket. She's furious, he said quietly, pulling out his phone.
Lauren.
Said she won't come back until we sell something. Said I ruined everything. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see a villain or a son, or even a failure. I saw a man standing in the ruins of a choice he thought he'd never have to answer for. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, his voice raw. Not just for the house. For everything. I nodded. Do you want to fix it? I asked. He blinked. Yes. Then come back to the house. He looked at me, confused. I thought, not as an owner, I clarified. As a father. As a man who needs to learn how to build again, not just inherit. He nodded slowly. And then I gave him the second surprise of the day. I'm putting the house in a trust. His head jerked toward me. For Lily, I said. It will stay in my name until she's 25. After that, it's hers if she wants it. If she earns it. He was silent for a long time. You're locking me out again. I'm locking out your entitlement, I said firmly. Not your presence. You can live here. You can raise your daughter here. But you're not going to use this house as leverage ever again. He nodded. No argument. Just the first glimmer of understanding I'd seen in a long, long time. 3 days later, I sat with Attorney Shaw at his office. We finalized the new trust documents. Clear language. Clear purpose. No room for loopholes. No room for betrayal. It protected the house from being sold, transferred, or borrowed against by anyone other than me, until Lily reached the age of 25 and demonstrated financial responsibility through a basic stewardship clause: education, work history, or public service. Some people would say you're controlling from beyond the grave, Shaw said, half joking. I smiled faintly. I'm not controlling, I said. I'm teaching. Something I should have done better with her father. He nodded. And what happens if Lily doesn't meet the criteria? Then the trust converts the house into a community education grant for underprivileged girls in Somerset County, I said. This house will never be used to destroy someone else's future again. He leaned back, impressed. Brilliant. No, I said. Necessary. That evening, Jacob returned to the house. Not as a conqueror, not as a fraud, but as a man who had finally come home on foot, not carried by inheritance or manipulation, but by the long, hard walk of consequence. Lily was with him. She ran to me the second she stepped through the door, arms wide, hair tangled, shouting, "Gamma!" I caught her in my arms and held her like she was air itself. And then, for the first time in months, the house felt warm again. Later, Jacob helped me clear out the garage. Dusty boxes, old furniture, memories. We worked side by side without speaking for a while. At one point, he held up an old drawing of the house, one he'd made in middle school, crayons and all. He looked at it for a long moment, then handed it to me. "I used to dream about building things," he said. "Then start again," I replied. And he did something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He smiled. Not for me. Not for Lauren. Just for himself. There's something about hearing a child laugh in a house you almost lost that rearranges your soul. Lily was in the garden, barefoot, twirling in the late spring sun, chasing butterflies with a paper net Jacob had made from an old coat hanger and a mesh laundry bag. She had no idea how close this place had come to disappearing beneath her feet. That was the point. Some battles aren't just about survival. They're about preservation. Not of bricks or floor plans, but of stories. Of roots. And now that the war was over, I could finally begin planting again. Literally. I was digging in the soil beneath Charles's rose arbor, carefully reviving the bed that had gone to weeds during the chaos, when Jacob came outside holding a manila envelope. "Mail came," he said. "There's something in here for you." I brushed the dirt from my gloves and stood to take it. The return address made my stomach flutter. Somerset County Court, Office of Probate and Property Affairs. My hands didn't shake. I opened it carefully. Inside, a stamped and finalized judgment. The house was legally, irrevocably, mine again. I sat down on the garden bench, right where Charles once read the paper every Sunday morning, and let the silence wrap around me. "Do you remember," I asked Jacob without looking up, "the day we brought you home from the hospital?" He sat beside me slowly. "It was snowing," I said. "We were terrified." Charles drove 10 miles under the speed limit the whole way. He kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other bracing the car seat like it might fly out. Jacob laughed softly. I didn't know that. I looked out the window the entire drive, thinking, we've built a house, but now we have to make it a home. And somehow we did. He nodded. I turned to him. "You almost burned it all down, Jacob." His eyes dropped. "But fire teaches us, too," I said. "It clears what doesn't belong. And what's left, what survives, it's stronger." He looked up. "Do you really forgive me?" I didn't rush the answer. "I forgive you because I want Lily to grow up in a house where forgiveness is possible. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetfulness. And it doesn't mean there won't be conditions." He nodded again, solemn. "I'll earn it, whatever that takes." "Good," I said, "because it's time you earned something real." I handed him a second envelope from my coat pocket. He opened it slowly. Inside was a folder labeled, "Carriage House Project, Initial Site Plan." His brow furrowed. "What is this?" "Your next step," I said. "I've applied for a local small business development grant to help convert the old carriage house into a design studio." He looked stunned. "I thought you said." "I said you'd have to earn your way back in. Not that I deny you a chance to try." "You'd really do this? For me?" "No," I said. "With you." Over the next few weeks, the house changed. Not in structure. In energy. Lily's laughter echoed off the walls again. The kitchen was alive with new recipes and old memories. Jacob, true to his word, began showing up, early mornings in the garden, late nights sketching blueprints under the soft glow of his laptop. And I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I lived without fear. No more hidden papers. No more quiet dread. Just sunrises, garden gloves, and the knowledge that I had kept my home, my voice, and my legacy intact. One evening, Jacob came into the living room holding a sketch pad. "I've been working on this," he said, shy like a schoolboy. He handed me the pad. It was a drawing of the house, but different. Wider porch, solar panels, a converted library room facing the sunrise. He had annotated it. Greenhouse, future plan. For Lily. For her children. For every chapter that comes next. I closed the sketch pad, my throat tight. "Do you like it?" he asked. "I love it," I said. "Because it means you finally understand." He looked down. "Understand what?" That this place doesn't belong to us, I said. It outlives us. And our only job is to protect it, shape it, and pass it on with more love than we received. The next morning, I called Attorney Shaw. I'd like to add one final amendment to the trust, I said. Of course, he replied. What would you like to change? I want to add a clause, I said, that requires anyone who inherits this house to teach a class, free of charge, once a year, on any subject they love, inside this home. He was quiet. Finally, he said, Why? Because this house was built on learning, and love, and second chances. And if those aren't taught, then none of this matters. He smiled. I'll draft it today. Later that week, Lily and I sat on the porch swing. She was holding a picture book and pointing out words she recognized. Home, she said proudly. That says home, Gamma. Yes, it does, I said, brushing her hair back. And do you know what it means? She shook her head. I pulled her close. It means a place where love lives longer than mistakes, and where stories always find a way to begin again. She nodded, and I closed my eyes as the wind moved through the garden. The war was over, but the story was just getting good. They say home is where the heart is. But sometimes you don't realize how much of your heart you've given away until you nearly lose the walls that hold it.
For a long time, I thought this fight was about the house, the deed,
the betrayal, the documents, the court dates. But now, standing on the porch in the golden glow of dusk, I see it wasn't about any of that.
It was about me.
And who I had allowed myself to become when I stopped insisting on being seen. The final touches on the carriage house came together in early July. Fresh siding, wide windows, drafting tables installed beneath a pitch ceiling, a mural on the back wall, painted by Lily and Jacob together, read, Create with care, build with heart. I watched them finish it, brushstrokes bold and clumsy, but full of color and meaning. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, we hosted a small garden gathering. Just a few neighbors, some old friends from the university, and even Maria, who had come out of retirement just to see the house that almost wasn't. They brought dishes, folded chairs, and memories. Jacob gave a short speech. Nothing rehearsed. Just a few quiet, honest words. I almost lost everything trying to chase something that wasn't real, he said. But this house, my mother, it reminded me what is real. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm proud to be building something again. Not just for me. For Lily. For all of us. Applause came, not thunderous, but heartfelt. And then Lily stood beside him, grinning. Gamma's house is magic, she declared. It grows stuff even when it's mad. Everyone laughed. And I felt something settle deep inside me.
Peace.
After the guests had gone, I stood alone on the back porch. The roses were in bloom. The garden smelled like fresh basil and dirt and hope. Jacob joined me quietly, hands in his pockets. I'm thinking of offering design workshops out of the studio, he said. Community-based. Low cost. Teach kids how to create something from scratch. I nodded. Your father would love that. He looked at me. What about you? What are you going to do now that you've won? I smiled, but it wasn't about victory. I'm going to live, I said. Like this house was always supposed to be lived in. With boundaries.
With joy.
And with doors that open to people who treat them with care. He looked down. You never stopped fighting for it. No, I said. Because it's more than a house. It's a story. One I refuse to let end in silence. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Somerset Historical Society. I had sent them an essay, just something I wrote one sleepless night after the court case ended. I didn't expect them to respond, but they had. We were deeply moved by your story, the letter read. We'd like to feature West Grove, your family home, in our fall issue as an example of legacy preservation and intergenerational stewardship. They wanted to send a writer, take photos, ask questions, not about the lawsuit.
About the history.
I laughed when I read it, overwhelmed. For the first time in months, I felt the world lean in, not to criticize or interrogate, but to listen. Jacob read the letter over my shoulder. Maybe we should get that porch repainted, he said.
No, I said.
Let it stay as it is. Worn in the right places. Like us. On the morning of the interview, I made tea, wore my nicest blouse, set out the photo albums. The writer was kind, a woman about Lily's age, with a gentle voice and eyes that soaked up everything. What made you fight for it? She asked near the end. So many people would have walked away, taken the buyout, moved on. I looked out the window at the swing set Jacob built last weekend, at Lily laughing under the arbor, at the house that once held my grief and now held my hope. Because it wasn't just about what I was losing, I said. It was about remembering who I was before I forgot myself for everyone else. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded, slowly, reverently. Would you mind if we titled the article, "The House That Fought Back"? I smiled. I'd be honored. That night, I tucked Lily into bed in her room upstairs. The same room her father once slept in, where he taped comic books to the wall and built Lego cities that sprawled across the carpet like empires. She looked at me sleepily. Gamma? Yes, baby? Are you magic? I laughed softly. Why would you ask that? Because I heard mommy say no one can stop you. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, it's not magic. It's memory. And knowing what's worth protecting. As the house grew quiet, I stepped outside one last time. The stars were out. The wind moved through the trees with the sound of whispered stories. And I realized something. This house hadn't just survived betrayal. It had survived me. The version of me who stayed quiet too long, who gave too much, who asked too little in return. And now, it stood tall because I finally had. For myself. For my son. For my granddaughter. For every woman who's ever been told to hand over the keys and be grateful for leftovers.
No.
Not anymore. I didn't just get my house back. I got myself back. And I'll never give either up again. If this story moved you like it moved me, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and tell us in the comments, what would you fight for if they tried to take it from you?